You know, I'm so sorry. I'm so forgetful. What's my name again?
It's Mr. Clark.
Oh, see? You just learned something.
Hello humans, welcome to the M Word, the Manx Sports podcast, brought to you by Martin. That's me.
I'm Matt.
That's him. Welcome back, Matthew. How are you today?
Oh, I'm still suffering with the man flu, unfortunately.
16 weeks on and still ill. Just a quick shout out to our sponsors. As normal, billboards.im do digital advertising. You'll see them down the prom, in town. You want to get your brand out there, get your name seen, they're the guys to go and see. That's billboards.im, the future of advertising. Thanks, guys. So, Matthew, we're going to dive straight into it today. So, the movie clip we played, or the audio clip we played at the beginning, I'm giving you a tip there on what it was. Did you recognise the movie?
Nope.
So, I'm not surprised either. It's called the Ron Clark Story, another remote film.
Nope.
I'll nod over to our guest. Have you heard of that film?
I have. Well, I've heard of Ron Clark, not the film.
Right. It's about a teacher from America who moves around schools to educate. There's many sort of interweaving stories within it, but the main overriding is his ability to deal with different types of people and students in different types of environments, and how to work with them collectively and individually, which I think ties in nicely with our guest today, who's kindly coming into the studio, a teacher of many years, and many of you may know, Neil MacGregor. Thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for the invitation. Always happy to spend some time talking about sport.
Good.
Yeah.
So the first question with that voice is, we kind of know the answer already, but are you a come over Manx, or Manx as a Welshman?
Well, I'm going to break the mould, because I think all your guests so far have been Manx, and I'm definitely a come over. Scottish father, English mother, born and bred in Wales, university in England, and living in the Isle of Man. So a bit of a mongrel.
Yeah.
Definite come over.
Heinz 57 dog type of thing. So when did you first come to the island?
1977. Took up a teaching job at Ballacameen. Actually had no idea where the Isle of Man was, or I didn't know anything about the Isle of Man when I applied for the job. And I vividly remember being in the library at Loughborough, and it was the time when all the teaching jobs came out in the Times Educational Supplement, and I was sitting there with a group of guys, and I remember seeing this job in the Isle of Man and whispering to them, because it was the library, has anybody heard of the Isle of Man? Does anybody know where it is? And somebody said, oh, it's a fantastic place. It won the Sunshine record for the UK last
Somebody's
year.
lying to you.
That was the Isle of Wight, of course. But on that basis, I applied for the job at Ballacameen, and I've been freezing cold ever since.
So go back a bit before that then, your early years, where were you brought up?
Born and brought up in a little village near Llanelli in South Wales.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, a place where sport was huge. Llanelli being a huge rugby town, especially. Probably most famous for the day that we beat the All Blacks. Wales have never beaten the All Blacks in my lifetime. I'm 64 years old, and Wales last beat them 66 years ago. But when I was a 17-year-old schoolboy, I went to watch my hometown club, the Llanelli Scarlets, beat the All Blacks. So that's what Llanelli's most known for, I guess.
Okay. Was that like a warm-up type of game for a...
It was in the days when clubs would play international touring teams. It doesn't actually happen anymore. And they were the last club to beat the All Blacks. So that's probably never going to happen again.
Yeah. So you were playing a lot of rugby in your younger years then? That was your main sport?
No, I was actually a competitive swimmer when I was younger. It just happened to be something that I was fairly good at. To be honest, I didn't have a huge passion for it. Given the choice, I would have much preferred to have been a talented rugby player or a cricketer or a footballer. But it wasn't to be. I was good enough for school teams but never shone. And swimming was just something I seemed to be fairly good at the time, so stuck with it.
Right. Is that something your parents helped you get into, the swimming? Or?
Not really. My parents both came from really tough backgrounds. My dad was an orphan. By the time he was 5, both his parents had died. My mum, born in Liverpool, was an evacuee during the war, so she was, at the age of 8, the theory was that big cities like Liverpool were big targets for being bombed, So they packed all the children in Liverpool onto trains and sent them to different parts of the country, and my mum was sent down to Wales and never went back. So neither of my parents really had parents. And never really had the opportunity to be involved in sport. But when my sister and I showed an aptitude and an enthusiasm for it, they couldn't have been more supportive. Yeah.
So you're swimming then, swimming locally. Were you particularly, was it just any event type of swimming, or because I think not know a lot about swimming, but people tend to specialise in different distances and I guess strokes as well.
Yeah, I was a backstroke swimmer, training from about the age of 8 or 9, 5 or 6 times a week. Used to swim for West Wales against the other districts of Wales and used to win.
Yeah.
So I guess at one time I was probably the best in Wales for my age, but as I say, didn't really have the passion for it.
Oh, right, okay.
But stuck with it because it was something I was
keep you out of
fairly
trouble
good at the time.
keep you out of
trouble.
So you mentioned so Loughborough. Where did that then fit into the story?
Yeah, going back to my parents, my mum tells me that I don't remember this, but she's adamant that it happened. At the age of 7, I told her I wanted to be a PE teacher. Now I know for sure that by the time I was 11, I knew I wanted to be a PE teacher, but I don't remember going as far back as the age of 7.
And is there anything looking back that you think, did you have a PE teacher at school that you thought looked up to?
Absolutely. The PE staff at our school were fantastic. All 3 of them had been to Loughborough, and I don't know whether you know, but there's a purple tracksuit that Loughborough students wear, and these 3 PE teachers came to school every day in these purple tracksuits, and I thought, I want one of those.
Sounds like a Harry Enfield kind of sketch.
So from the age of 11, I was adamant that I wanted to go to Loughborough and I wanted to become a PE teacher. And I sometimes find it difficult to understand people these days who say they go to university and they finish and they're still not sure what they want to do. Whereas, as I said,
Neil, I'm 43 and I have no idea what I want to do.
Really? Yeah. But I'm retired now, and it gave me 40 odd years of thoroughly enjoyable career.
It's funny because one of the first, I know you from a long time back, but one of the first times your name came up for the podcast was chatting to George, and he obviously talked about kind of the effect you had on him, which was positive. But then looking back of those school teachers you looked up to back then, that obviously had an impact on you back then. Yeah,
I was talking to another retired teacher fairly recently, and I said if there was one thing, if I was going to have my time again, I would do more of, it's dropping in little things to children. You can say a couple of words to a child and it doesn't mean much to you and you don't even remember it, but 30 years later they'll come up to you and say, do you remember when you told me this? And the effect you can have on young people is perhaps not always apparent when you're in the middle of the job. And it's only when people come up to you a few years later and say, sometimes what an effect something you've said to them had on them.
I suspect there's probably more of that happening, you probably know, so you kind of sat saying you'd like to do more, but you probably have, and you're probably just not aware of 90% of them as the odd person that will say to you.
I'm not talking about me in particular, I'm just saying generally. I think teachers don't realise how much those words of encouragement, how much of an effect they can have on young people.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, chatting with, getting tying in other chatting this while, like doing the podcast, chatting to other people when we're chatting to Rich Sill about nature versus nurture, and that when you're in that age gap, when you can leave a real imprint on children in a good way, which is obviously
I know
teachers.
He said his wife was a teacher.
Yeah, exactly.
She was getting huge job satisfaction. I mean, I'd come home so many days and say to my wife, I'd have done today for nothing. I would have done it as a hobby.
Right.
Especially in the summer. And if I had gone to the Isle of Wight, maybe, that would have been but when you're outside in the summer teaching athletics and cricket, and it's just a joy.
Yeah, I'm sure. So you're at Loughborough, you go, or you look for or you see the job advertised.
Yeah.
Do you then come to the Ironman for the interview, or is it done?
Yeah.
Do you have telephones back in those days, Neil?
What was that,
Do you have telephones back in those days?
We did have telephones, not mobiles, and I still don't have a mobile. But came over for the interview, and a couple of months later started teaching at Ballacomine.
Right, okay.
And had 10 really enjoyable years there
As a PE teacher.
as a PE teacher.
And do you tend to do other subjects that happen?
When we were training, we had to train in another subject, but I think by the time we'd finished, all schools were so big that you needed full-time PE teachers.
Right.
So I have taught English from time to time, but not a great deal because schools are so big now. You need 3 or 4 males and 3 or 4 female PE teachers full-time without having to teach another subject.
Right. So your time at Ballacameen, enjoyable?
Loved it. I was doing a lot of swimming coaching. I was the island coach for 5 years during my time there. I always think I was slightly unlucky. I was the island coach for 5 years and got a trip to the first Island Games, which were held on the Isle of Man, and a trip to the Commonwealth Games in 1986, which were in Edinburgh.
Right.
So when I hear of people going to the Island Games in Bermuda and the Commonwealth Games in New Zealand, I think perhaps my timing wasn't as it should have been. But yeah, really enjoyed that and coached some really good swimmers, including somebody called Sean Pilling, who went on to become Sean Bryce, maiden name, and competed in triathlon for Great Britain in the Sydney Olympics.
Right. Okay. Wow. Okay. So the experience of the Commonwealth Games, then that must be, going out in front of the, doing the opening ceremony and that type of thing must be pretty.
Yeah, I was really looking forward to the opening ceremony. I'd seen it so many times on TV, marching round, and it poured with rain.
Oh, right.
It was Edinburgh, and I think it rained virtually every day for 3 weeks. But a fantastic experience. Enjoyed every minute of it.
And as a coach, do you then train train all strokes? How does that work in coaching?
Yes,
Women?
Train all strokes. The particular year I went in 1986, the 2 people who qualified were 2 brothers, Graham Stigand and Shane Stigand.
Okay, yeah.
And Graham, of course, went on to become a top triathlete, competed at Kona.
Yeah. I think he's down in the hall in the NSC.
He
I think
is.
there's
He is.
a thing up there.
I think he was also, he got a mention in the Guinness Book of Records. I think he was the only swimmer to have competed in something like 5 or 6 Commonwealth Games.
All right, okay.
Yeah, so he has a certificate from Guinness.
All right, I have to reach out to Stiggy.
When the events are going on, do you feel much pressure or anything of that nature of you've coached these guys, you want them to be doing well, if they don't, do you feel anything that...
Obviously you do. I think in a sport like swimming there are less variables. I think I've felt more pressure when I've been coaching rugby teams. So many more variables. You know within a few tenths of a second what your swimmers are going to do.
Right, yeah.
And you know they're going to struggle to compete with the best in the world. You hope they get personal bests. So yeah, for their sake you want them to do something equivalent to their personal best, but you know beforehand that they're going to be there or thereabouts. Whereas in a game like rugby or whatever, so many more variables, you don't really know what's going to happen.
Oh, it's quite interesting. Just to loop back to Loughborough, you mentioned about just to do some name dropping in there that you went to. Was it at Loughborough you were with? Was it Seb Coe was there and?
Yeah, in our hall of residence, a year below my year, but in the same hall of us was Clive Woodward, who's now Sir Clive Woodward, coached the England rugby team when they won the World Cup. Sebastian Coe was also at Loughborough at the same time.
He was a half-decent runner.
He wasn't bad,
I do remember him competing in my early days.
But a guy who I became really friendly with at Loughborough, somebody called Guy Smith, was somebody who ended up working, the 2 of us worked together at Castle Rushen for 20 years.
Oh, right, okay.
So we were best of friends at Loughborough, same year group, same hall of residence, and then 10 years after leaving Loughborough, the opportunity came for me to work with Guy at Castle Rushen. 2 jobs came up at the same time.
You told him it was sunny here all the time, didn't you?
I told him it was sunny, wonderful climate, so I persuaded him to come over. And the chance to work with Guy was just too good an opportunity to miss. I actually took a pay cut and left. But I enjoyed my time at Ballacameen. It would have taken a lot to make me leave. But the chance to work with an old friend, and not just an old friend, but somebody who I had great respect for as a sportsman. He was actually one of the best all-rounders at Loughborough.
Right.
And that's saying something. It's quite a sporty university. Which I knew he was even better as a teacher than he was as an all-rounder.
Right.
And we worked together for about 20 years.
Right, so you're the two PE teacher or two
We
of the
were,
PE
and then
teachers.
after about 10 years of working together, the school grew, the numbers grew, and we needed an extra PE teacher, and Cliff Dunn joined us, another fantastic teacher. And I think it's fair to say that over that sort of period, Castle Rushen gained a bit of a reputation for being a school that was pretty good at sport.
Yeah, right.
That's it, certainly the reason I know I chose to go to Castle Rushen, because that was it at the time. I remember my mum's asking, we can either move and go to Peel, or we can stay and go to Castletown. And with the reputation they had with the three teachers you just mentioned there, it was the obvious choice really. And I know a lot of people around my years and that felt the same.
That's nice to
Which
hear.
is good.
Yeah.
I was going to actually ask about, I suppose your teaching techniques yourself. How do you very much, or what are your are you conscious of your teaching techniques? Are you kind of hands-on? Do you feel you need to kick people along or treat everyone individually? Or
I think a lot of people would describe me as a bit of a disciplinarian,
right?
But maybe just in the early year or two. And I think once the line's been established, what's
Set the
acceptable
tone.
and what's not, then you back off. And I don't think it was even a year or two. We would be quite hard with the year sevens when they came in,
Right.
just for a while, up until half term, until they understood what was acceptable and what wasn't. And I think round about half term of the first term, you would consciously start to back off a little bit and develop a much better relationship with the kids. But before that line had to be established.
Yeah. I suppose not. What? Just can you expand on that? Just so for me, is that you make them do extra runs, or it's how they talk to you, or what?
Yeah, it's
a bit of everything.
It's all of that. Not so much the extra runs, but yeah, if you haven't got self-discipline and you haven't got respect for the people who are teaching you, then I think that's a big block on how far you're going to progress.
Right. Okay. I imagine that's quite hard to also explain to younger children as well. To this, this is, you need to learn this self-discipline at this age.
I think the good
respect.
thing was that the three of us on the male side and the girls as well. We had a fantastic girls' PE department at Castle Rushen. We were all pretty much on the same wavelength.
Right. Yeah.
So there was no change in. Didn't matter whose lesson you went to. The same standards were expected and adhered to.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, just setting the tone, isn't it?
Yeah.
And during that time, were you then at Castle Rushen doing other? You mentioned, we talked earlier about Ballycameen. Were you doing other classes, or was it just PE because of the size of the school?
I think I did about a year or two of little bits of English, but
Right.
generally just PE and games full time, and swimming as well.
Yeah. Okay. So during that time at Castle Rushen, what sports are you doing on a personal level?
I was playing rugby. Played for Douglas Rugby Club for 15 years, and in those days we had an island team as well. It doesn't happen anymore. But we had an island team and represented the island for about 15 years again.
Right. Where did you play?
I played at hooker,
Right. Okay.
so about 6 stone 2 light for the modern day hooker. But in those days, the technique of actually hooking the ball back was important, whereas now the ball doesn't even go in straight.
Right.
So when the ball had to go in straight, your technique of being able to strike the ball back was vitally important, and you could get away with being small because if you were flexible and you could get your leg across and pull that ball back.
Right.
Whereas nowadays,
So you were in the front line of that, not knowing anything about it. You're in the front line, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. With a lot of heavy, strong people, I would guess. Were you obviously looking at you now? You're fairly lean,
12 stone soaking wet,
Right. Okay.
much lighter than all the people I was playing with. Really.
Right.
I think what got me through was a bit of tenacity and the fact that I loved tackling.
Right.
I think that was the aspect of the game I loved more than anything. Didn't have great speed, didn't have size, bulk, but I think I made up for it with a bit of tenacity and the love of tackling.
Right. And what was the environment like at the rugby club?
It was just a great scene to come into. I came over not knowing anybody on the Isle of Man, and one of the first things I did was to ask about the local rugby club, and somebody said Douglas Rugby Club's just down the road. Was made very welcome right from the start, and and it's a great way of meeting new friends. And I think this is true about sport generally. You were talking earlier, Martin, about some of the friends you have now were friends you had from cycling years ago, and the camaraderie of it all. Again, went to New Zealand last year on the Lions tour with 3 other boys from Douglas Rugby Club who 25 years ago we all decided to start a standing order of putting £10 a month into a kitty so that when we retired we could go and watch the British Lions in New Zealand. And you know, just an example of the sort of camaraderie 25 years after we were playing together. We end up in New Zealand watching the Lions together.
And how long were you in New Zealand? Down there for?
We were there about 3.5 weeks, so we saw the 3 tests and a couple of other games as well.
Right. Didn't fancy staying down there?
Would have loved to. What a great country.
Had you been there before?
Never, no. One of the nicest people in the world. When we actually beat the All Blacks in one of the test matches, you couldn't buy a drink. Their supporters were, you know, they'd be saying, "We don't lose very often, guys, can we buy you a drink?"
That's nice.
Just fantastic people. After a couple of days we said our ambition was to find a New Zealander we didn't like, and we didn't actually manage that in 3.5 weeks.
That's a compliment. Yeah, I've heard a lot about the country. They say it's a pretty amazing place.
Fantastic.
I tell you got around a lot when you were down there. Tours are all over the place.
The last 5 games were all in North Island, and that's the ones we saw, so we didn't actually get to South Island, but we pretty much travelled around most of North Island.
And was there 4 of you there, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, right, wow. Yeah, proper boys tour.
It was.
So, during those school years at Castle Rushen, you were starting to look to get involved, I guess, and I know you got involved with taking the lads to Twickenham for the rugby. So when we spoke to Johnny Bellis a few weeks back, he talked about going away and playing at Twickenham. So I presume, and I know Matt, you'd been there as well. That was part of what you were doing at the school.
The way it came about is I happened to see a competition advertised in the Daily Telegraph called the Emerging Schools Rugby Tournament. So it was basically open to every school in the country, apart from those who had a massive fixture list every year. So your likes of Kirkham Grammar School, Millfield, Sedbergh, they weren't allowed to enter that competition. And I think the criteria was something like if you played less than 15 games in a regular season, then you were eligible for this tournament. It was for under 12s. So I thought we'll have a go at this, and they'd said that the final was at Twickenham. Not thinking for a minute that we had any hope of getting that far, but I think somebody said there were about 1,800 schools entered the initial stages. We won the Ironman section first. This was in the year 2000 when Johnny played. Then we had to go and play in the North of England finals in Preston Grasshoppers, and we won that. That then put us through to the last 64, and the last 64 played on a Saturday morning at Staines Rugby Club in 8 groups of 8, and the winners of each group, they were the 8 teams that would progress to Twickenham that same afternoon and play in the quarter-final of this competition. So we won our group in Staines. The 8 schools were then given, believe it or not, a police escort from Staines Rugby Club to Twickenham. We played in the quarter-final and won that. We played in the semi-final, won that. And then the final was played at half-time of the Army against the Navy match. So there were 40,000 people in the stadium. We were taken into the England change rooms. They kitted us out as the Navy. So we were given kit as the Navy. The other school from Redruth in Cornwall, they were kitted out as the Army. So every time we touched the ball, we had 20,000 people shouting for us. And every time they touched it, 20,000 people supporting them. But what a memory, fantastic. And as I say, Johnny Bellis, one of your previous guests, was my scrum half that day. And then the next year, we qualified for Twickenham again. We went down to Staines.
Same route, the same route.
No, different year route.
Right. Oh, sorry, I meant route as in to get to the finals.
Same route,
same process.
So next year's under 12s. So Johnny Bellis was my scrum half the first time, and then the next time we got there, a young boy called Matthew Looker, you may have heard of, he was my scrum half.
Right.
So we got to play at Twickenham again. And then, annoyingly, the next year we tried to enter it and they said, no, you've qualified for Twickenham twice in 2 times. You're not an emerging school anymore.
Right, wow.
but the criteria said as long as you play less than 15 games, and we, you know, living on the Isle of Man, you play 4 schools. That's your regular fixture list. So by every criteria, we should have been allowed to carry on, but that was it. We entered twice, got to Twickenham twice, and were told, that's your lot, mate.
Yeah, I suppose anyway, obviously, ultimately a massive compliment, isn't it? Because they don't want you there, because you're obviously so good. It seems that way to me. You've got there 2 finals. They're like, you've had your go, boys. Go away. We'll give someone else a go.
Yeah.
No, it's fantastic, man. I say, just when you're recapping it there, just memories of the day going on playing that. I always remember playing that the last match to put us through where we needed to win. And I remember, we were so happy. I even remember we ran and hugged. I ended up breaking my glasses or something like that. It wasn't until after, you couldn't care. I was so happy. And then on the coach over, and for me, even happier scoring the try. Yeah. And I've still got the photo of that, the ticket and all
Fantastic,
that still hung up. It was
When you think there are Premiership rugby players who never get to play at Twickenham. Full-time professional rugby players playing in the top league in Britain, and they never play at Twickenham. And Matt's not only played, he's got to try there. How many people can say that?
Do you look back as a teacher, and obviously it must give you a massive sense of pride, because again we talked earlier about the impact you have on children, and here's Matt 25 years later, and that's a massive moment in his life. That must give you massive satisfaction. Or do you just kind of think, well, it's my job?
No, it was a massive moment in my life as well, I'd have to say. But what gave me just as big a kick as a teacher was seeing the number of pupils we'd get turning up to practices. As a PE teacher, that was just such a big kick for me. We would get 60 or 70 year 7s turning up to rugby training, and similar sort of numbers: football, rugby, cricket, basketball, netball. The girls would be getting massive numbers for netball, hockey. If you turned up at Castle Rushen in a lunchtime and looked at the field, there was hardly a blade of grass that wasn't in use.
That's just the environment you've created to get.
I don't know.
It has to be.
We give a lot of our time, but the boys and the girls at Castle Rushen were fantastic for turning up to practices, and that's what you thrive on as a PE teacher.
And what was it like travelling with, I don't know how many go away, 20 of you go away, 20, 12-year-olds? That must be pretty difficult. Come on, you can be honest.
Yeah, 1 or 2, we had to keep a close eye on.
Drinking cider.
No, they weren't too bad.
And would it be just a few teachers would take a group away, or did sometimes be parents involved?
Johnny Bellis's dad was somebody who gave us, he used to help with the rugby coaching at Castle Rushen. Became a good friend. So we would draft people in. Non-PE teachers, we'd get them doing things as well at lunchtimes and after school.
And we do obviously swimming training as well, I assume, because obviously with your background down at Castle Rushen.
Yeah, not so much. When I left Ballacameen, that's why I gave up the island coaching job, because at Ballacameen I had the facility there. We had our own pool. We could do morning sessions. I was doing training sessions before school with the top swimmers. And when I moved down to Castle Rushen, I sort of stepped away from that and concentrated more on the rugby.
And were you still doing personally any swimming just for leisure or anything of that nature?
A little bit, not too much. It was about the same time that I started doing the odd triathlon as well.
Right, okay.
Because I was from a swimming background, I didn't do much swimming training. I was an absolutely useless cyclist and runner. So I had to concentrate on those two really.
So how did triathlon come about?
It's another interesting story. I remember coming in from a rugby training session one day at Douglas Rugby Club, and somebody put a poster up in the changing rooms, and it was from the Ironman Tourist Board advertising something called a triathlon. Nobody'd heard of one before. It was the first one that had ever been on there. One of the first, I think, in the UK. And because it was advertised by the Tourist Board, I think a lot of people came from across. The winner was an Irishman. I'd say probably more than half the entry were from across. But I saw this thing advertised, and it was you have to do a mile swim in the aqua row, then it was a lap of the TT course on the bike, and a 9-mile run. So I thought, sounds like fun, I'll have a go at that. Hadn't ridden a bike since primary school. I was about 27 at the time. One of the props said, I've got a rusty old bike, you can borrow that. So a week before the event, I thought, I'd better see if I can ride around the TT course. Set off about 7 o'clock one morning, nothing to eat or drink. Got to Ramsey okay, and about a mile up the climb from Ramsey, I just collapsed in an absolute heap at the side of the road. Couldn't stand up, couldn't walk, totally out of fuel. Didn't understand anything about the fact that I should have taken a bottle of water with me, or at least nothing to eat or drink. And ended up hitching a lift back to Douglas. So that was my first footsteps into triathlon. The event was a week late, and by then I'd spoken to a few guys from cycling who'd said, you've got to take things to eat and drink. You have to fuel yourself. So a week later, took part in the event, learned my lesson, got out of the pool. I think I was second out of the pool. Sat in the change rooms, and because people had said you've got to eat and drink, I'd made some sandwiches and a flask of coffee. So I was sitting in the change rooms having my little picnic, a few sandwiches and a flask of coffee, and people were running into the change rooms, grabbing things, running out, and I thought, I don't think I've quite sussed this triathlon idea. But that was my first attempt. I managed to get round. Right. But it wasn't a great beginning.
What's inside you to go, to see a sign on a rugby club board and go, I want to do that? Are you driven? Or is it just like challenges or just something different?
I wouldn't describe myself as driven at all, but I do like a bit of a challenge, and it sounded like fun. I've never been what I would call a top sportsman at any sport, but I've always been someone who put my hand up and said, if they needed somebody in the house athletics team to do the 1500 metres, nobody wanted to do it, I'll have a go at that.
Okay.
Don't ever remember finishing anything other than last in all my sports days, but would always love
just
having
participation.
Love participating. Yeah.
That is
and that's why I got so much of a kick, I think, out of seeing the big numbers at Castle Rushen turning up to practice. Remember one year having the year 10 boys together one time. They were all together, and we happened to ask them, how many of you boys have never represented the school at any sport? And there were about 80 or 90 of them there, and there were 11 boys who'd never represented the school at any sport. So I said to them, if I can organise a game of football against another school on a similar basis that they are only going to pick from boys who've never played for the school before, would you be interested in playing? And to a man they all said, yeah, we'd be up for that. So we organised I think it was Ramsey Grammar School we played, and it was fantastic. So by the end of that game, everybody in that year group had represented the school at sport. Yeah,
it sometimes does get a bit lost, doesn't it, when we talk about participation? That's at the core what certainly sports at grassroots levels is about. Participation. It's not about, we talk about many other things here, the psychology, the mindset, wanting to compete, getting the edge, getting the game, but it's all about the participation, meeting new people, enjoying your time together, learning to, I suppose, play team sports, which is a massive part of it. I mean, Rich talks about there's no such thing as an individual sport. Everything's a team sport anyway.
Up on that. That was interesting.
And it's even got me thinking.
You have to have a team around you, don't you? Even in individual sports.
And it got me thinking a lot about that. But so at its core, participation is so important, isn't it? So did you then, after that first triathlon, was it, I want to do more of these? I'm mad.
I quite enjoyed it. I think it was a couple of years then before there was another one on the Ironman.
They were quite a very new concept generally, I think, weren't they?
Absolutely. People forget how new a sport triathlon is.
Were you still running? Were you still doing the sports individually in between, or did you kind of do that?
I was playing rugby, and if something like that came up, I'd maybe practice for a week at something and give it a go. But then, I think it was 1998. There was a triathlon club on the Ironman by then, and we had a Christmas night out, and I think a few beers were involved, and one of the guys who was only about my standard, neither of us were great shakes at triathlon, we were, never competing for podium places, but he said to me, I'm thinking of having a go at one of these Ironman things. in the year 2000 to celebrate the millennium. Do you fancy having a go? And at that stage, nobody in the Isle of Man had ever done one. We all thought it was for superhuman people. But as I say, I think we'd had a couple of beers, and it didn't take too long for me to say, well, yeah, okay then. Because now, if he'd have been one of the stars of the Isle of Man triathlon scene, I'd have thought, well, no, you could do it, but there's no way I could manage one of those. But because he was about my ability, and as I say, very much middle of the pack, I thought, well, okay, let's give it a go. So we decided we were going to give it a year and a half. So this was Christmas '98, so we'd have all of '99 and then do an Ironman in 2000 to celebrate the millennium. Well, after about 4 or 5 months, I won't mention his name, but he dropped out and decided, no, this isn't for me, I'm not going to do this.
We'll put it in the
But I thought,
footnotes.
well, I've done a fair bit of training already, I'll keep this going. And about a year later then, I was on the start line in Wolverhampton on at 5:30 in a pitch dark morning, about to get into a freezing cold lake and do one of these Ironman triathlon things. And yeah, managed to get round.
How many would it be at the start of that type of event back in those days?
About 1,000, I think.
Right, okay, yeah, good number.
1,000
right.
people.
Must have been fairly early out there to swim, being a strong swimmer, I assume.
Reasonably, yes,
Yeah.
but then of course you have the disadvantage that all day people are flying past you. The good cyclists and the runners are just, you feel as if you're not moving on the bike.
Yeah. Did you ever struggle with injuries or anything like that? Or have you always
No, I've been
pretty...
very lucky with injuries, especially, my background in rugby. I've broken all sorts of bones in rugby, but not a sort of injury that would stop you.
Yeah. Bit of healing time and you
Yeah,
can go
and
again.
no, knees have been good, luckily enough. Knees and ankles have held out.
Right. So what year was that first Ironman?
That was in 2000.
2000, right, okay.
And then as a result, that was going to be my one and only one, but as a result of that, I was picked for the Great Britain age group team, which for me, a very average triathlete, I couldn't believe this, so I got picked for the Great Britain age group team for the long distance world championships in Denmark,
Okay.
which was another Ironman distance race, so I thought, well, I can't turn that down,
Too
I'll have to
right.
do another one.
Yeah.
So went and did that, and again, great experience.
Same year or the following year?
Following year,
right,
2001.
yeah.
Yeah.
And how was that experience in Denmark?
Oh, fantastic, to wear the GB kit
Yeah,
for
right.
somebody who's never considered himself to be any good at cycling and running. A bit surreal, really.
Did your mindset change in how you approached that one from the first one of just wanting to complete it?
You weren't drinking tea, were you, between the transitions?
No, I wasn't drinking tea, but you're right,
Shirt.
Matt. Just wearing that GB tri-suit puts you in a different mindset. All I wanted to do in the first one was to finish it. Just get to the finish within the cut-off. If I was 30 seconds inside the cut-off, I'd have been very happy with that. But yeah, it kind of makes you think you've got to take this a bit more seriously now.
I take it's all self-funded though. You don't.
Yeah, it is.
Apart from you get a jersey.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
So then that was going to be it, the second one. But then one of these M.Dot, which is the branded Ironman, came to the UK for the first time about 5 years later. So a friend and I decided we'd have a go at that. And I did okay in that. Finished, I think, 4th in my age group.
Right,
It made
wow.
me think, gosh, if I could win my age group in a few years' time, I can get to Kona.
Yeah.
So again,
Is your wife pulling her hair out of it?
yeah, she's been very supportive, I'd have to say. So we went, the first Ironman UK was in Sherborne in Dorset, and then it moved to Bolton, and that coincided with me reaching the age of 55. So I thought, well, I've moved up an age group now, in theory, this should get a little bit easier. So I thought, right, I'm going to give it a year, a good year, and pretty much dedicated a year of my life to see if I could have a chance of winning my age group and getting to Kona, which is every triathlete's dream, even though, again, you self-fund it.
Yeah.
It's not cheap. So didn't have a drink for a year. Trained every day for a year. I know that's not recommended and I should know better. But I did. I didn't have a day off training. Trained every day for a year and finished 3rd.
Oh.
But there was only one place in my age group. But you have to be at the award ceremony to claim your place. So I was called up onto the stage on the podium for 3rd. They called the second guy up and he wasn't there. So I thought, my God, I'm one place away here. This could be my dream. So they called the winner up. He was from Belgium, fantastic, beat me by a long way. Shook his hand and said, "That was amazing, your time." I said, "Are you going to Kona?" And he said, "Yes." That was my dream. Gone in that one word. It could easily have been the case that he'd been before and didn't want the expense of going again, or, you know, for various reasons couldn't go, but yeah, he said yes. If he'd said no, I would have been on my way to Kona.
Sure, wow. And how, in those days of Ironman, I assume the fields were pretty big. I mean, they're obviously massive now, but I assume even back then.
Yeah, I think they would always reach the limits, which would be between 1,500 and 2,000.
Right. And you got Ironman, so for those that, when you complete an Ironman, you're allowed, quote unquote, to get an Ironman tattoo. Did you ever go to that length?
I did.
Right, okay.
My daughter persuaded me. She was there when I completed my first one. And, you get a free massage after an Ironman, and the guy on the next table looked at me and he said, "Is this your first one?" And I said, "Yeah." "How do you know?" He said, "Well, you haven't got the tattoo." So my daughter was there and said, "Right, you're going to have that tattoo." And she actually came to watch. At that time, my daughter did no running, no cycling, no swimming. And she was so blown away by the whole atmosphere of the day that she said, "I'm going to do one of these one day."
All right, okay.
And 2 years later, from nothing, she completed Ironman Bolton and qualified for Kona.
Oh, really?
Because
just a rub in your face.
Very few people in her age group, to be fair, but she did qualify and turned the place down.
Oh, did she?
I was tearing my hair.
You'd have had to pay for it though, wouldn't you?
She booked to go to a music festival with
her friends.
So, I said, "Give the place to your dad, I'll have it."
Yeah. Stick a skirt on and away you go. You go in her age category.
So, yeah, it drinks a little bit. But now, of course, the number of people doing Ironman, probably at least a couple of hundred, I would guess, from the Alaman have done an Ironman.
Yeah. So you were the first ever Manxman to do, well, I use the word Manxman in the sense of,
The
appreciate
first
you're
person
coming over.
on the Ironman to do an Ironman distance race,
Right. So I know then, moving on in the early 2000s, you started getting involved with the Ironman Sports Council. How did that initially come about? Were you invited? Did you put your hand up?
I think nowadays you have to apply, but somebody asked me would I be interested. I'd been asked about 5 years previously and felt I didn't have the time at that time, but when I was asked the second time, I felt I was in the right situation and accepted the invitation and did 10 years on the Sports Council. Thoroughly enjoyed it, worked with some great people, and one of my first meetings with the Ironman Sports Council in my first year, we were doing the interviews for Sport Aid, and a young boy called Mark Cavendish, who was about 13 or 14 at the time, came along. They had to fill a form in beforehand, and I read this form. And you had to put down your aims for the next 12 months, for the next 4 years, and then your ultimate aims. And most of the Manx people would put as their ultimate aim to compete in the Commonwealth Games or something like that. And this Mark Cavendish on his form had put in ultimate aims to win Olympic medals, to win stages of the Tour de France, to become world road race champion. And this was a boy who was 13 or 14. And what also resonated with me during the interview was when he said British Cycling had asked him to go away. This was November, we were interviewing him, and he said British Cycling had asked him to go away in a warm weather training camp to Mallorca over Christmas. And he said, "I've told them that, in my opinion, warm weather training makes you soft. I've told them I'm going to stay in the Alaman and train in the rain and the cold." And, it just blew us all away. When he went out, I think everyone looked around and said, "Wow, this boy's going places."
And I think what's even more about that story is now, obviously cycling's so high profile on the island, and you see the younger riders, they can see a pathway. Back then there was no pathway, no one had done what he'd done. So to even, I use the word dream or think of being able to do that, it
needs somebody like that. You're exactly right. And it comes from that wide base of the pyramid, and I think what Dot and her team do at the NSC on a Tuesday night has had a massive effect on what's at the top of that pyramid. The huge numbers, and the bigger your numbers are, again going back to the Castle Rushen days and having huge numbers turning up for practices. Not surprising really, from that wide base we had some pretty handy teams at the top.
And As apart from those interviews for Sport Aid, what would the council kind of involve? What would you be doing?
Yeah, you were on one of two subcommittees, and the one that interested me was the Sport Aid one. I felt I had a fairly wide base of knowledge about a lot of different sports. So I was actually on that for the full 10 years. They like to move you around to the different committees, but most of my involvement was with the Sport Aid.
So that's interviewing candidates. Well, not interviewing, but chatting to candidates about their goals, aspirations.
Reading all the applications that would come in. You'd get maybe 150 applicants, and then you'd narrow that down to the ones you were going to interview. And then after the interviews, you decide which ones you were able to support. But yeah, I found that aspect of it really enjoyable.
And I assume you're doing that in a group environment.
Yeah,
yeah.
There were 4 or 5.
Right.
There's always somebody from the business community on Sport Aid. I think it was David Stacey at the time, who I think is still involved. And the rest were members of the Sports Council.
And did you notice from difference, depending on the sport environment they were in, how their approach or their applications differed? And this isn't to pick out bad or good sports, but would you notice certain sports might approach, or people from sport background their approach might be slightly different?
I think I'm not sure what you're getting at, but in terms of...
I think in the sense of, like, I think chatting to George, when we look at, say, rugby players who seem to be I only use the word slightly different breed. So on the rugby pitch, they're very respectful of the referee. There's there seems to be a certain amount of discipline there that's potentially not there in other sports, and therefore their approach to things is just slightly different. So I just wondered if you see that segmented. So in the way they approach an Ironman sport.
You used the word discipline then, Martin, in terms of respect for the referee and so on. Another way of looking at the word discipline is people like swimmers and cyclists were the two sports that I felt were the ones that worked the hardest.
Right.
You know, swimmers would train 9-10 times a week before school, after school. Cyclists would be out on their bikes every day, and both sports that would demand a huge amount of effort, physical effort, tough sports. So yeah, when those sort of people came along and told you about their training, you couldn't help
appreciate the dedication.
You couldn't help but be impressed. And I suppose there are other sports then, maybe less so.
Yeah. And do parents come along to those? Are parents part of that?
If they were young enough, if the applicants were young enough, the parents were allowed to come along.
Yeah.
And I think, Cam would have been in that category, but I think he was always his own person and felt confident enough and just blew us all away. Confident without coming across as at all big-headed. Just somebody who, after hearing him speak, you thought, he's going to do well, and as well, we want him to do well. We really hope this guy does it, and he did everything that was on that form. I think that form is still in the Sports Institute somewhere, and interesting to look back on that every one of those aims that he outlined, he's actually achieved.
And must a lot of satisfaction for yourself then, being part of that council for those number of years, and seeing those and being able to...
Yeah, there were others who did a heck of a lot more work than me. I was very fortunate to work under Jeff Carron, was the chairman of the Sports Council for the whole 10 years. He did a fantastic job. People like Andy Varnum, Steve Partington, great people to work with. And I believe about 5 years prior to when I went on the Sports Council, you went on to represent your sport. Right. So there would be somebody representing rugby, somebody representing football, cricket and so on. And so they were all fighting their own corners, whereas that had changed by the time I started, and you weren't there to represent the sport. So I felt everybody on that committee was there for the general good of sport of the Ironman, not for their sport.
No, that's good. Yeah, that was a good way of doing it. And ultimately, stepping away from that role, was that time, or you just thought you'd served your time, or?
Yeah, 10 years is about what they expect you to do.
A long time.
Gary, I've forgotten Gary's surname now, who's now chairman. He started the same time as me, and he's still going, so he's done a few more years.
Yeah, right.
10 years was about what was expected.
Yeah, okay. So moving on in your life, you done, how long were you at Castle Rushen in the end?
I was 20 years, 10 years at Balcomine, 20 years at Castle Rushen.
And then you moved on from there.
And then, I saw this, came home from school one night, and it would have taken wild horses to get me out of Castle Rushen, but I saw this job advertised at the Buchan School, so a 5-yard walk across the road from where I'd been for 20 years. And I thought, what a challenge that's going to be, a complete change of age group.
Right.
So I applied for the job and got it. It's not a job I would have wanted to do for 40 years, but for those last 8 years, thoroughly enjoyed every second. Huge learning curve for the first year.
Right.
Went from coaching 18-year-old rugby players to tripping over 4-year-olds. And doing head and shoulders, knees and toes, the action kids and all that sort of stuff. But I had an absolute ball, loved every minute of the time there.
What made you change?
Just something to finish off the last 8 years, something for a bit of a change. I think you all need a change sometimes to keep you fresh. And as I say, it was tough for the first few months, getting your head around what this age group were capable of doing and what they weren't. But then really enjoyed it. And again, going back to rugby, one of the boys I taught there, Bevan Rod, has now become a professional with Sale Sharks. He actually played as a fly half for the Buchan, played for England prep schools while he was at the Buchan as a fly half, and is now a prop for Sale Sharks. He's played in the Premiership, he plays for England under 20s.
There's quite a few rugby players that I suppose just haven't chatted to a couple on the podcast, that there's more rugby going on than I certainly realised on the Isle of Man. I don't know, maybe I need to read the papers.
Going away and playing at a high standard. We've got Phil Kringle, an ex-Castle Rushen boy, who's playing in the Championship, one below the Premiership at the moment. And Bevan, who's actually injured at the moment, unfortunately, he's, as I say, England under 20s, and already as a 19-year-old has made his debut for Sale Sharks in the Premiership as a prop. And you don't really reach your peak as a prop till you're about 26. So I think he's got a huge career ahead of him.
I take it you keep in touch with a lot of these guys.
Yeah, Bevan especially. I've been across and watched him in school games.
They still call you Sir?
No. It was funny when we started, after he'd left, when he got to about the age of 17, some of the texts and emails that we sending each other, it was, "Hi Mr MacGregor," then it was, "Hi Neil," then it was, "Hi mate." So, yeah, but that's how it should be. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So the 10 years then, was that all sports you were doing at Buchan again? I guess at that young age, it's a bit of everything, isn't it?
All sports, and with the younger ones, very generic stuff.
Yeah,
so
right.
You wouldn't classify as a particular sport, just ball skills and catching and throwing and things like that.
Participation again, that participation, I guess, and getting involved.
We actually started a triathlon there as well, so that's still going as well. Everybody in the school takes part. We have it's on a bank holiday when all the schools in the island are shut, apart from the Buchan.
Right.
So they're open, which means all the parents are off work as well, so they can come and watch.
Right.
And that still goes on.
Right. And over your years of teaching, how's I assume it was obviously very male-orientated sport, I guess. And how have you seen that transition change into, I guess, ultimately mixed sports and then competing together? Just generally.
Different age groups?
Yeah. Well, no, from male to female. Just, I guess it was more. Or is it just you've got a participation? So
I tend to, people come up to me, "Do you remember me at school?" And if it's a boy, I'll probably remember them. But if it's a girl, no, because I very rarely taught any girls.
Right. Okay. Do they mix them nowadays, or will they?
Not so much. No. I think certainly at Castle Rushen
do the netball or whatever.
Sports.
Yeah. Right.
Boys would play rugby, football, basketball, cricket, athletics, and the girls would do their hockey rounders, netball.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when it's swimming, they're just different sessions. So then the boys would be
different
different
time. Boys swimming session and the girls swimming session.
Right. Okay. Right. So you presumably with those last few years at booking, you always had a retirement age in mind, did you, that you were going to...
Yeah, it tends to be 60 for teachers.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, when I got to the age of 60, I sort of packed up full time, and I'm 64 now, so for the last 4 years I've been doing bits of supply teaching, only at the Bucket in Castle Rushen.
Right.
What's really pleasing is the days I've been into Castle Rushen, seeing that the sort of numbers I was talking about that attended training, that's still happening, and if anything it's grown.
Right.
Fantastic PE teachers there at the moment who just kept the thing going. It would broken my heart to see things drop off, and
it's like a legacy you've left
they
there,
have,
really.
well, no, not me, but
Well, you built part of that legacy though, having worked there.
well, it's just good to see that it's still happening, and that the numbers are probably even bigger than what they were.
Yeah.
And you doing anything sport-wise yourself?
I tick over, Matt. I swim, cycle or run pretty much every day of my life, very, very slowly. I did the Sid Quirk a few weeks ago, and somebody said who was watching me, the only way we could tell if you were walking or running was the expression on your face, so that pretty much sums up my speed at the moment. Did an 8 mile sea swim in September in North Wales. There's a little group of us that, a bit like last of the summer wine, you look for a little challenge and then have a go at it. So next year we've entered the Hurley Burley, which is a 10k run followed by a 10k swim.
Wow.
That's held in North Wales somewhere. So we'll have to crack it
obviously
out.
a sea swim.
Again, just to finish the thing. You know,
Right,
we're not racing to compete. It's just a little challenge.
Sea swim, I assume, is that?
Sea swim.
Yeah, right. You're nuts. Just to actually loop right back, back in the days at Castle Rushen, I know you went to Canada for a year. How did that all come about, and what made you want to go out there? And did you take the whole family with you?
Yes, we did. It was it was an organisation called the League of Exchange of Commonwealth Teachers, so you could exchange to anywhere in the Commonwealth. So you think of the teams who are in the Commonwealth Games, basically anywhere. So the three big countries that people swapped to were either New Zealand, Australia or Canada. So you just apply generally, and the offer came up to spend a year just north of Toronto. My daughter was about 7 weeks old when we left. My son was 3. My wife wasn't going to be working at that time anyway because of the children, so it was an ideal time for us to go. But what a fantastic experience. We swapped houses, we swapped cars. I worked in his school for a year, he taught at Castle Rushen for a year. I taught things like American football in the snow, snow football they called it. I say taught it.
Tried to learn how to play.
I joined in. One of the teachers, his brother, played for Toronto Argonauts, which were the Canadian football team, so he'd come along and help and coach the session where I just joined in basically and played rugby in the snow. Happy days. Did things like curling. Again, there was a boy, I took the sixth form for curling, and I said to them, I'm going to hold my hands up here. I've never seen this sport before. I know nothing about it. One of the boys said, I play for Ontario. I'll take the session. So again, happy days, just having to go at a bit of curling. There was an after-school ski club. Just a fantastic experience.
And did you find or see any difference in the way the kids approached sport between America and Isle of Man?
That's a good question. One thing I did notice that was huge for me was that they didn't wear school uniform. Having always taught at schools where school uniform was paramount, and I was a firm advocate of school uniform. By the time I came back, I changed my mind completely. I felt that it didn't really make any difference. And had I not spent that year in Canada, I would never have been that person saying that. I was such an advocate of school uniform. But the children, well, I say children, they were 14 to 18 was the school I worked at. Fantastic group of young people. And I thought, do they really need this restriction of uniform? Maybe it's something that teachers just want to impose. It changed my mind completely.
What made you decide to go in the first place?
Again, it's one of these things you see an advert and you think, I wouldn't mind to go at that.
Not everyone's like that, Neil.
One guy from the Isle of Man, in fact, Jeff Cork, who also taught at Castle Rushen, he had done it a few years beforehand, and told me the stories of how much he'd enjoyed it. So, yeah, let's give it a go.
So a few questions around teaching kids and young adults ultimately. When you look at, what do you think of generally, like, you've obviously got leadership skills. Is that something you've ever been conscious of working on, or is that just something that comes naturally? Because obviously you've got to have them to be able to get the kids.
Yes, I think all teachers have leadership qualities. I certainly don't think I'm up there with the best, but yeah, you do have leadership qualities. If you don't have them when you start, after the 6 months in the job, you develop them.
Yeah, right.
You can't but.
Not something you consciously actively saw, you just on the job learning almost.
Yeah, on the job learning, and I would say I was a very, very shy person when I was younger.
Right.
But the more you do of something, the more confident you get.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't
No, that's all right. And then I suppose over the years as well, just dealing with children, have you seen a change in, and again this isn't a positive or a negative comment, just generally kids, I suppose, attitudes, or kids, social media changes the environment that we live in ultimately? Have you seen that over your years of teaching?
It's a question that people often ask teachers, are children worse now than they were years ago? And
I don't wish to add in the kinds of worse, because that's not, I don't want to, but just change.
But I went to an inset day once, and very few of the inset days I attended over 40 years were of any use at all, but I vividly remember one where we walked in, and written on the whiteboard at the front was this statement: children these days have no discipline, they are unruly, they have no respect for their elders, and a whole list of things about children these days. And we had to guess who'd written it. So various people came up with all these things, and it was actually written by somebody like Sophocles, so written thousands of years ago. Right. And it just brought home how everybody seems to think that children are not as good as they were years ago. Well, this was being said thousands of years ago. And I don't think children are any different. They will respond to praise, and they will respond to being told off as well, hopefully.
Do you consider yourself a motivator?
I would like to think so, that all teachers are motivators. I'd probably say that was one of my, if I had to pick a strength, it wasn't my technical knowledge of all these different sports, it was probably that I was a reasonable motivator.
Okay, interesting. Okay, thanks for your time. I appreciate you coming in and
thank
having
you
a chat with us. It's been fascinating. You've obviously, I think, the thing I took before we chatted, and I know you keep dodging it, because every time I ask you, you just take no self-praise whatsoever, but the impact you've had clearly on people. I think Matt is a clear example of that, sat here.
Definitely.
George definitely was when we met him. I think when Matt and I first talked about doing the podcast, one of the things we wanted to get to was people that work at grassroots level that people don't see necessarily. You see the athletes getting the medals, you see the athletes get on the back page of the paper, but most of that doesn't happen with the people at the background setting the foundation, whether it's teaching to taking classes after school, training people. So it's been really interesting to chat to you about that type of thing. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. As I say, always happy to talk sport.
No worries. You got much to add, Matthew?
Yeah, I'll do the usual. So wherever you're listening, please like, subscribe and share, and if you'd be so kind to give us a 5-star review, we'd really appreciate it. You can find us on Facebook on the M Word Podcast, Twitter we're Manx Sports Pod, and Instagram we are the M Word IOM. And just a reminder, please keep recommending guests for us to speak to, because we're always happy to sit and chat with anyone who's out there.
And I think we also have a new website launching. It might be out by the time this podcast is out as well, so keep an eye out on that, which will have the episodes on and bits of other info and some blogs as well. So thanks again for letting us into your ears, and it's word out from Martin.
And word out from Matt.